I never thought a single night could change my life so dramatically. But that's exactly what happened when my wife, Sarah, went to her best friend's bachelorette party. It wasn't just any party, it was the event that would ultimately lead to the end of our marriage. Sarah and I had been married for 5 years. We met in college, fell madly in love, and tied the knot shortly after graduation. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, always laughing, finishing each other's sentences, and supporting one another through thick and thin. I thought we had it all figured out. That is, until Jessica's bachelorette party. Jessica was Sarah's best friend since high school. They were inseparable, and when Jessica announced her engagement, Sarah was over the moon. She threw herself into helping with the wedding preparations, and of course, planning the bachelorette party. "It's going to be epic," Sarah gushed one evening as we sat on the couch, her laptop balanced on her knees as she scrolled through Pinterest boards. "We're thinking of doing a weekend in Vegas. What do you think?" I shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant. "Sounds fun. Just be careful, okay?" Sarah rolled her eyes playfully. "Oh, come on, Jake. It's not like I'm going to do anything crazy. It's just a girl's trip." If only I had known then how wrong she would be. The weekend of the bachelorette party arrived, and I helped Sarah pack her bags. As she zipped up her suitcase, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. "You sure you don't want me to drive you to the airport?" I asked, hoping she'd change her mind. Sarah shook her head. "Nah, Jessica's picking me up. We're all meeting at her place first." She must have noticed the concern on my face because she added, "Don't worry so much, babe. I'll text you when we land, okay?" I nodded, pulling her in for a hug. "Have fun. I love you." "Love you too," she replied, kissing me quickly before heading out the door. The next 2 days were oddly quiet. Sarah sent me a few texts, a selfie of the girls on the plane, a picture of their hotel room view, a blurry shot from a club. But overall, communication was sparse. I told myself it was normal, that she was just busy having fun with her friends. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. It wasn't until Sunday evening that I finally heard the key turn in the lock. Sarah stumbled in, looking disheveled and exhausted. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, and she was carrying her heels in her hand. "Hey," I said, getting up from the couch. "How was it?" Sarah blinked at me, as if just realizing I was there. "Oh, hey. It was great. Wild." She let out a small, nervous laugh. "I'm beat, though. Think I'm gonna go shower and crash." I frowned. This wasn't like Sarah at all. Usually, after a trip, she'd be bubbling over with stories and anecdotes. "You sure you're okay?" I asked, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched away slightly. Yeah. Just tired. And, a bit hungover. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow, okay?" Before I could respond, she had disappeared into our bedroom, the sound of the shower starting moments later. I stood there in the living room, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. Something had happened in Vegas. Something Sarah didn't want to talk about. Little did I know that something would tear our entire world apart. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Sarah had already left for work, leaving behind a hastily scribbled note about an early meeting. It wasn't like her to leave without saying goodbye, especially after being away for the weekend. As I got ready for work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Sarah's behavior the night before, her rushed departure this morning, it all pointed to a secret she was desperately trying to keep. I tried to focus on my job throughout the day, but my mind kept wandering back to Sarah. What had happened in Vegas? Why was she acting so strange? The questions swirled in my head, each one more unsettling than the last. By the time I got home that evening, I had worked myself into a state of near panic. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Sarah was already home when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine. She looked up as I entered, and I could see the tension in her shoulders, the worry in her eyes. Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. And just like that, I knew. Whatever she was about to say would change everything. I sat down across from her, my heart pounding in my chest. What's going on, Sarah? What happened in Vegas? She took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with the stem of her wine glass. I made a mistake, Jake. A terrible mistake. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Sarah began to speak, her words washing over me like a tidal wave of betrayal and heartbreak. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a story that would test the very foundations of our relationship, forcing us to confront truths we never imagined and make decisions that would alter the course of our lives forever. Sarah's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt my heart pounding in my ears as I waited for her to continue, dreading what was to come. I slept with someone else, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. The world seemed to stop. I sat there, frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. Sarah, my wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world, had cheated on me. Who? I managed to choke out, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. It was Mike. Jessica's fiancé's best man. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Mike. I'd met him a few times at couples gatherings. He was always the life of the party, charming and outgoing. The exact opposite of me. How did it happen? I asked, not sure if I really wanted to know the answer. Sarah took a shaky breath. We were all out at this club. Everyone was drinking, dancing. Mike and I got to talking, and I don't know, Jake. It just happened. We were both so drunk, and Stop, I cut her off, unable to bear hearing any more details. I don't want to know. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the weight of her confession pressing down on us. I struggled to reconcile the woman sitting across from me with the Sarah I thought I knew. How could she do this to us? I'm so sorry, Jake, Sarah said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I pulled away instinctively, and she flinched as if I'd slapped her. It was a horrible mistake. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I love you. I stood up abruptly, needing to put some distance between us. You love me? If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with someone else. It was just one night. Sarah pleaded, tears now streaming down her face. One stupid, drunken mistake. Please, Jake, we can work through this. We can go to counseling, anything. Just please don't give up on us. I turned away, unable to look at her. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to believe that it was just a one-time mistake. But another part, a louder part, was screaming in pain and anger. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. Jake, wait. Sarah called after me, but I was already gone. I drove aimlessly for hours, my thoughts a jumbled mess. Memories of our life together flashed through my mind, our first date, the day I proposed, our wedding day. Had it all been a lie? How could I ever trust her again? It was past midnight when I finally returned home. Sarah was curled up on the couch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She sat up as I entered, hope and fear warring on her face. Jake, I held up a hand, cutting her off. I can't do this right now, Sarah. I need time to think. She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Okay. I understand. I'll sleep in the guest room. The next few days were a blur. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office to avoid going home. Sarah tried to talk to me several times, but I shut her down. I wasn't ready to face her, to face what had happened. It was on the fourth day after her confession that I made my decision. I came home early, finding Sarah in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up as I entered, her eyes wary. We need to talk, I said, echoing her words from that fateful night. Sarah nodded, wiping her hands on a dish towel before following me to the living room. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the distance between us feeling both too small and impossibly vast. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "About us, about what happened, about our future." Sarah watched me intently, her body tense as if bracing for a blow. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah," I said finally. "I can't be with someone I don't trust. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, final and irrevocable. Sarah's face crumpled, a sob escaping her lips. "Jake, please," she begged. "Don't do this. We can fix this, I know we can. I'll do anything, please just give me another chance." I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "I'm sorry, Sarah. But this isn't something I can just get over. You broke us. And I don't think I can put the pieces back together." As I watched Sarah break down, a small part of me wanted to take it all back, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But I knew I couldn't. The trust between us was shattered, and without trust, what did we really have? "I'll be staying at Brad's for a while," I said, referring to my best friend who had offered me his spare room. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." Sarah didn't respond, her body shaking with sobs. I stood up, feeling a finality to my movements. This was it. The end of our marriage, the end of the life we had built together. As I packed a bag and headed for the door, I paused for a moment, looking back at the woman I had once promised to love for the rest of my life. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said softly. And with that, I walked out, closing the door on 5 years of marriage and a future I thought was certain. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, forgiveness, and the complexities of human relationships. The weeks following my decision to divorce Sarah were a blur of paperwork, heated discussions with lawyers, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied. Anything to avoid thinking about the life I'd left behind. Brad, true to his word, let me crash at his place indefinitely. He tried his best to keep my spirits up, dragging me out for beers or to watch the game, but I could tell he was worried. I wasn't exactly the best company these days. "You know, Jake," he said one evening as we sat on his couch, half watching a basketball game. "Maybe you should think about talking to someone. Like a therapist or something." I scoffed, taking a swig of my beer. "What for? So I can pay someone to tell me how screwed up my life is?" "No thanks." Brad sighed, turning to face me fully. "Look, man. I get it. What Sarah did, it's fucked up. But you can't keep going on like this. You're barely eating, you're working yourself to death, and when's the last time you actually slept through the night?" I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died on my lips. He was right, and we both knew it. I was a mess. "Fine," I grumbled. "I'll think about it." And think about it I did. It took another week of tossing and turning at night before I finally made the call. Dr. Evelyn Chen came highly recommended, specializing in relationship trauma and divorce counseling. Our first session was uncomfortable, to say the least. I sat stiffly on her plush couch, feeling out of place in her warmly lit office. "So, Jake," Dr. Chen said, her voice calm and professional. "Why don't you tell me what brings you here today?" I let out a bitter laugh. "My wife cheated on me at her best friend's bachelorette party. I'm getting divorced. That about sums it up." Dr. Chen nodded, her expression sympathetic but not pitying. "I see. And how are you coping with this change in your life? How do you think?" I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. "Sorry, I don't know how to deal with this. I feel angry all the time. Hurt. Betrayed. I can't sleep, can't eat. It's like my whole world has been turned upside down." As I spoke, something inside me seemed to crack open. Before I knew it, words were pouring out of me, all the pain, the confusion, the fear I'd been bottling up since that night Sarah confessed. Dr. Chen listened patiently, occasionally asking a question or offering a gentle prompt. By the end of the session, I felt drained but somehow lighter, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. "Jake," Dr. Chen said as our time was wrapping up. "Healing from betrayal is a process. It won't happen overnight. But I want you to try something this week. Each day, I want you to write down one thing, just one small thing, that you're grateful for. Can you do that for me?" I nodded, not entirely convinced but willing to try anything at this point. The gratitude exercise felt forced at first. Some days, the best I could come up with was coffee or not getting stuck in traffic. But as the weeks went by, I found myself looking for things to be grateful for. Brad's unwavering support. The satisfaction of completing a tough project at work. The first warm day of spring. It was during one of these moments of forced gratitude that I ran into Jessica at the grocery store. I nearly turned and fled when I saw her, but she caught my eye before I could escape. "Jake," she said, her voice hesitant. How are you?" I shrugged, suddenly fascinated by the nutrition label on a can of soup. "I'm fine." Jessica sighed. "Look, Jake. I know you probably hate me right now, and I don't blame you. But I want you to know. I had no idea what was happening that night. If I had known." I finally looked up at her, surprised to see tears in her eyes. Did you go through with the wedding?" I asked, realizing I had no idea what had happened with her and Mike after that night. Jessica shook her head. "No. Once I found out what Mike did, I couldn't. We postponed it first, but eventually, well, let's just say you're not the only one going through a divorce." I felt a twinge of sympathy for Jessica. She was collateral damage in all of this, just like me. "I'm sorry," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. Jessica gave me a sad smile. "Me too. For everything. I hope you can find happiness again, Jake. You deserve it." As I watched her walk away, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a crack in the wall of anger and hurt I'd built around myself. That night, as I sat down to write my daily gratitude, I found myself penning more than just a single line. I wrote about the unexpected moment of connection with Jessica, about the realization that I wasn't alone in my pain. And for the first time since that fateful night, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there might be life after betrayal. Little did I know, this small moment of clarity was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with more unexpected encounters, painful revelations, and moments of growth that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, forgiveness, and most importantly, myself. As spring turned to summer, I found myself slowly emerging from the fog of anger and hurt that had enveloped me since Sarah's betrayal. My sessions with Dr. Chen continued, and while I couldn't say I was healed, I was at least functioning again. I'd moved out of Brad's spare room and into a small apartment of my own, a step towards reclaiming my independence. It was on a warm Saturday afternoon that I decided to tackle the daunting task of going through the boxes of stuff I'd hurriedly packed when I left our shared home. I'd been putting it off for months, dreading the onslaught of memories each item might bring. As I sorted through old photos and mementos, I came across a small velvet box tucked away in a corner. My heart clenched as I recognized it, the box that had held Sarah's engagement ring. With trembling hands, I opened it, half expecting to find it empty. But there it was, the diamond catching the light just as it had the day I proposed. Attached to the box was a note in Sarah's handwriting. "Jake, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please keep this. Sell it, donate it, whatever you want." I just couldn't bear to keep it knowing how I'd betrayed what it symbolized. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." I sat there for a long time, the ring box open in my hands, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, hurt, nostalgia, and something else I couldn't quite name. It was Dr. Chen's voice in my head that finally broke through the chaos. Emotions are like waves. We can't stop them from coming, but we can choose which ones to surf. Taking a deep breath, I closed the box and set it aside. I'd deal with it later. For now, I had more unpacking to do. It was late evening by the time I finished, my new apartment now looking a bit more lived in, if not entirely homey. Exhausted but feeling a sense of accomplishment, I decided to treat myself to dinner at the local pub. The Rusty Nail was a cozy spot, all worn wood and soft lighting. I settled at the bar, ordered a burger and a beer, and let myself relax for what felt like the first time in months. "Is this seat taken?" I looked up to see a woman gesturing to the stool next to me. She was pretty, with curly brown hair and warm eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Oh, no." "Go ahead," I stammered, suddenly aware of how long it had been since I'd engaged in casual conversation with anyone, let alone an attractive woman. "Thanks," she said, sliding onto the stool. "I'm Olivia, by the way." "Jake," I replied, managing a small smile. We fell into easy conversation, discussing everything from the merits of the pub's craft beer selection to our favorite books. It was nice. Normal. For a brief moment, I forgot about divorce papers and betrayal and just enjoyed talking to someone new. As the night wore on, I found myself opening up more. Maybe it was the beer, or maybe it was just the relief of talking to someone who didn't know my whole sad story. Before I knew it, I was telling Olivia about Sarah, the divorce, all of it. To my surprise, Olivia didn't run for the hills. Instead, she listened with genuine empathy, occasionally sharing bits of her own story, a bad breakup, the struggle to trust again. "It's not easy, is it?" she said softly. "Putting yourself back out there after something like that." I shook my head. "No, it's not. To be honest, I'm not sure I'm ready to." Olivia smiled, understanding in her eyes. "That's okay, you know. There's no timeline for healing. You'll know when you're ready." As we said our goodbyes later that night, exchanging numbers with promises to meet up again as friends, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Sarah. My heart rate spiked as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. "Jake, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. But I wanted to let you know that I'm moving. Got a job offer in Seattle. I think it's best for both of us if I go. I'm so sorry for everything. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Take care of yourself. Sarah." I stared at the message for a long time, a mix of emotions washing over me. Relief that she was leaving, sadness for the end of an era, anger that still simmered beneath the surface. But mostly, I felt okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. And for now, that was enough. Later that day, in my session with Dr. Chen, I found myself talking about Olivia, about Sarah's text, about the strange sense of peace I'd woken up with. "It sounds like you're starting to move forward, Jake," Dr. Chen said, a note of approval in her voice. "How does that feel?" I thought about it for a moment. "Scary," I admitted. "But also, right? Like I'm finally facing the right direction, even if I'm not sure where I'm going yet." Dr. Chen smiled. "That's a good place to be. Remember, healing isn't linear. There will still be hard days ahead. But it seems like you're developing the tools to handle them." As I left her office that day, I felt a sense of determination I hadn't experienced in months. The road ahead was still uncertain, full of potential pitfalls and challenges. But for the first time since that fateful night of Sarah's confession, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Little did I know, life had a few more surprises in store, some good, some bad, all part of the messy, complicated journey of moving on after betrayal. The real test of my newfound strength was yet to come, and it would challenge everything I thought I knew about forgiveness, love, and second chances. I continued seeing Dr. Chen weekly, and over time, I began to understand that my healing wasn't just about Sarah's infidelity. It was about figuring out who I was outside of our marriage and how to rebuild myself after everything fell apart. Through therapy, I confronted the part of me that felt like maybe I wasn't good enough for Sarah, and that her cheating was a reflection of something lacking in me. It was painful to admit, but a necessary step in learning to let go of the anger that consumed me. One evening, months after the initial break, I was out for a drink with Brad when Sarah's name came up for the first time in a while. "You ever think about what she's doing now?" Brad asked, glancing at me cautiously. I shrugged. "Not really. It doesn't matter. What she does now is her business. And, strangely, I meant it. The raw anger and hurt had softened into something more manageable. It wasn't that I was over it, but I was beginning to understand that moving on wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. The paperwork, the endless back and forths with lawyers, and the division of our lives came to an end with a single signature. It felt anticlimactic, like the last page of a book closing with no grand conclusion, but maybe that was for the best. In the months that followed, I started to feel like myself again, slowly but surely. I reconnected with old friends, took up running again, and even booked a solo trip to the mountains, something I'd always wanted to do but had put off during my marriage. Sarah and I never spoke again after the divorce was finalized. She moved out of the city, and I didn't bother to keep track of her. Life, I realized, would go on without her. My happiness wasn't tied to that relationship anymore. It wasn't easy, but I knew I was ready to start over.